All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining our session here this afternoon. Great to see everyone here at another great MedTech conference. I am Mike White. I'm a principal with the Alexander Group. I lead our MedTech practice, and we're here to talk today about a session called Idea to Impact. What it takes to translate an idea into a product and to get it into providers' hands, positively impacting patient outcomes and meeting financial objectives. So there's a lot there, as you can imagine. I'm honored to be joined today by three executives who have a proven track record of launching, commercializing new products in MedTech. So what we'll do here today is we'll go through a number of series of questions and topics tied into Idea to Impact. So first, I have Namal Nawana, chairman and founder at Sephiros, Maureen Mulvihill, the CEO at Actuated Medical, and then Daniel Hawkins, currently the CEO at Avail Med Systems. And all three of these individuals have long track records beyond their current roles. So what I'll do is to start off here is ask, we'll go down in order, just to talk a little bit more about your current role in products, as well as other relevant products and companies that you've helped launch.
Well, thanks, Mike. Hi, I'm Namal. Probably know quite a few of you here, formerly the CEO of Smith & Nephew and also the CEO of Alere, so companies in medtech and diagnostics. Today, I lead my own venture firm, which is called NeoEnter. We have a design firm called NeoEnter Design, and we've got our CTO Ziad out the back here. And Sephiros, which is a partnership with KKR, and that's all in consumer diagnostics. Another company that is in our portfolio is called Satio. That's a set of blood draw and diagnostics directly from the upper arm. So lots of innovation, lots of fun, basically. Love being in this industry, and happy to see everyone today.
Hi, I'm Maureen Mulvihill, and I'm president and CEO of Actuated Medical. We're a product innovator located in central Pennsylvania. I also sit on the AvaMed board of directors and the AvaMed Excel board of directors. And I guess I'm program chair. But Nancy back there gets all the credit for the program. Anyway, so we do several devices in neuro surgery type devices that are in the preclinical stage right now. We have a clinical device that clears feeding tubes while the tube stays in the patient. It's called the Tube Clear System. And then we have other devices that maybe crossing our fingers so we get FDA clearance the end of this month. We're hoping for that. It'll be a GI device. So we're really product innovators. But everything we do has a motion component. And so we bring motion to medicine. Thank you.
My name is Daniel Hawkins. I'm the founder and CEO of Avail Med Systems. Avail is a technology to enable folks from outside the operating room or procedure room to be inside the room using cameras and real-time audio and video and intraprocedural imaging. The goal here is to enable everything from R&D engineers all the way through to clinical education and procedure support to happen without the requirement of physically being in the room. So that has advantages not only for healthcare itself between healthcare practitioners, but clearly efficiencies for industry to be able to do what needs to get done inside of procedure rooms. Prior to Avail, I was the inventor of intravascular lithotripsy and the founder of Shockwave Medical. And prior to that, a number of earlier technologies and companies leading back to Intuitive Surgical, where I was involved with Fred Mull in launching the Da Vinci.
All right. Thank you all. So let's start with Daniel. So we've talked a little bit about the impact or importance of product to market fit among a number of other factors when launching a new product. Can you start by just giving your perspective around how critical product to market fit is compared to other aspects, sales and marketing teams and regulatory and other aspects of launching a new product?
Sure. So there's a lot in that question. For me, fundamentally, it starts with a need. That need needs to be a painkiller and not something that needs just a little vitamin. In other words, it has to be a problem that is structural. If you are solving a problem that is structural and it is a large problem, the market will define itself for you. The product that you develop needs to keep in mind every pair of hands that touch that product. It needs to keep in mind the ultimate end user, needs to keep in mind the patient, it needs to keep in mind those people who prep the product that is then used by the ultimate end user. It needs to keep in mind those who pay for the product. It needs to keep in mind all of those who advocate for and against it at conferences. So innovation to me is really centered around you've got to change behavior with technology. Technology itself does nothing. It's got to change behavior. So when the best example I'll give in recent history would in fact be what we did over at Shockwave. It was an angioplasty balloon. Along the side of the road, there were probably 20 or 30 technologies from companies that were trying to modify calcium in coronary vessels. They went bankrupt, or they got acquired for half of their ultimate investment dollars, or they went into market flash in the pan and were clinically, just simply not used anymore. Why? Because fundamentally, they didn't actually solve the problem. Fundamentally, they did not change the superstructure of the vessel the way Shockwave did. Fundamentally, they actually caused more problems than they solved. An appropriate product to market fit solves the problem, avoids other problems, and is extraordinarily easy to adopt. One of the things we could have done, and I'll stop in just a minute on that particular description, but this is super important from my perspective at least on designing products. One of the things we could have done on our generator at Shockwave is given a lot of flexibility for the cardiologist to tweak it. Knobs and buttons and adjustments and power levels. And I forced the engineering team to put no buttons. There is nothing adjustable. It is simply a balloon and one button that is on. You let go of the thumb, it is off. That is it. Why did we do that? Complexity will hurt adoption. Complexity leads to variability in outcomes. If you allow a clinical community to tweak a whole bunch of knobs that are not critical to the ultimate function, you will have variable outcomes. If you allow the clinical community to adjust knobs that solve for the 1%, but you can program it for the 99, program for the 99, get rid of the knobs, and launch. Product to market fit needs to keep in mind not only what you're solving, but the adoption associated with that.
I might just add to that and say, know what you're skating towards, because I think those comments from Daniel are super important. But some of you are designing products that already have reimbursement, and some of you are designing products that you don't actually know who's going to pay for it yet. And those require different strategies, and you need to just go eyes wide open into those circumstances. The other thing I'd say is really be clear all along the way how you win at what you're doing versus the current offering. So if you're solving a structural problem, then you've really got clear differentiation. That's what he's saying. And I think that's massively important. And that might change over time, because all of us are looking at what we can see, but there's all sorts of people developing things that are adjacent to what we're doing, and sometimes we forget that. So you can't work in isolation. Do think about who's going to pay for all of this, because that's too often a reason for technologies not to make it or companies to fail.
Yeah, so I would go with one other point to what they were saying, and they did say it, but I'm going to say it a little bit differently, is, we did tons of end user discovery. We had 500 nurses tell us that this was a problem, the bane of their existence, a shift killer. But they are not decision makers. They're not the ones that know how to bring a new product into the hospital. So you really need to figure out who's going to be your customer, but really who's going to pay for it, who's going to sign the order to get that technology in, and figure out and get them to say, yes, we need that device. And it's a process, right? You have to talk to the value analysis committees. You have to talk to the clinician champion. And it's usually a physician champion. It's not a nurse champion. So all those things you have to have all set up to go into your launch into the hospital with your products. And it's all really, really important to make it happen. And so for our device, we're now going to insurance companies and saying, do you know you're the one paying when they're not using our device? And so now we're getting some headway. But going to the nurse, and it was the nurse's problem. They just don't know how to make that decision and how to bring things in.
Maureen, there's a saying that that applies in the business world and is used in the business world a lot, that hindsight is 20/20. What have you related to product launch and product commercialization? Is there anything that stands out in your mind of either some things that you would have done differently that you've learned from the organization you work with, or others?
And how much time do we have?
19 minutes and 30 seconds.
I mean, that's what this is all about, right? It's the learning, as we get in there and things keep changing. The med tech field, everything's moving all the time. I remember sitting outside of Hershey Medical Center. The phone call came in, and it was, FDA is going to give us the adult indication. They're not going to give us the pediatric indication. What do you want to do? And I'm like, well, it's a business decision. Let's take the adult, and we'll come back for the pediatric. What a mistake, right? Because getting a pediatric indication is so hard to do. So that would be one of mine, like, I would say shit moments, right? Like, oh crap, you just didn't know what was gonna happen. But anyway, so we've had a clinical study at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia for 6-7 years, right? Enrollment for kids is tough, right? Enrolling any clinical study is really tough. Did we know it was gonna be like that? No. And then my other one was, I kind of just said that too, right? We're a young company back then. We got the product out there. We had lots of nurses that told us this was a huge issue for them, but they're not the decision maker. So really need to understand who's going to buy your product, who's going to pay for your product before you launch.
So Namal, you've had a number of experiences in small startups as well as large established companies. Tell us a little bit about that and what the differences you see are when launching products in those two separate environments.
Sure. So first of all, I should self-declare and say I started life as a research engineer and development engineer in really large corporations. And after about 30 years of work, I now have lots of little startups that have a few engineers. So I don't know if I've gone forwards, backwards, or which direction. But, just to see where we're at in this audience, if you're working in a company with more than 20 staff, can you just raise your hand for me? Okay, and then less than 20 staff. See, I just wanted to know who I'd be offending more. And it's about the same. So I'm just going to have to complain and tell you my honest truth.
So you're going to wing it.
So the funny thing is that whether you're small or you're large, we're all trying to do the same thing, which is do what Daniel said, is address something that needs to happen in what we do and go get it to patients. But we got to do it in very different ways if we're a big corporation or we're a small company. And what's happened over time is that people have really triangulated to basically the same process of stage gate R&D and de-risking ourselves and having known moments in time where we can say, yeah, we feel comfortable to go to the next step. But actually in a large company versus a small company, it still happens quite differently. In the large company, you have like 10 to 1,000 people working on one program, cross-functional teams and, experts and, really segmented tasks. In a small company, you have, hey, I've got everything. I've got to figure this out, and I've got to get it to market. And they actually have
no money.
And no money. We're going to get to the money part too, but because there's probably no money in the big corporations as well for some of you, so you've got to figure that out. But I think that that's really important. You've got to have different. You're going to have different blind spots. If you're in the big company, you might not actually own the whole thing, and that might stop you from solving the problem. And I've seen it, you just go slower. In the small company, you might actually not know what you're doing. And it can be as basic as that. And so, this kind of environment where you're exposing yourself to people that have been in the industry, I can really advocate to, looking outside of your own little box if you're in a small organization. So one thing is, I think that we all triangulate to this stage gate R&D approach, quality management systems, because this is our industry. So you have to be realistic about that. The second thing, I think Maureen's point around financing. Let's just say it out loud. If you're in a big corporation and you've got an annual budget, and that annual budget, yes, you can have an argument at the end of the year about what it is next year. It's still different to working in a small environment where you have a known cash runway and you've got to get certain tasks before value inflection. And you probably didn't remember, you probably didn't get it right from the beginning as to how much money you needed to get there, so you're going to have to raise cash. So they're very different funding environments. And I'd say also, most large corporations have big existing businesses. So what is R&D in a big corporation? You're doing a lot of sustaining engineering. And this, by virtue of just what it is, you've got a technology and you're trying to make it incrementally better. Actually, what happens every day is quite different than this mindset about, hey, we've got a structural problem, we're going to go listen to customers and make something new happen. So that feels very different, and it manifests itself in a different level of innovation. So I'd say actually we're all somewhat trying to do the same thing, which is to get patients and our customers new products, and at the same time, it's just so different. So I've actually enjoyed working on both sides of it, and I'd recommend it to anyone.
Go ahead, Maureen.
Yeah, so I've only done small companies, so I can't speak to the big company, but I love it, right? Every day is something different, and you're thinking about the patient, you're thinking about the patient's stories. I was just telling Daniel about one of our COVID stories, right? So middle of the afternoon, a doctor called us. He had a pediatric patient whose feeding tube had been clogged for 8 days. Think about that. What were they feeding him? How was he getting his medication? How was he getting his hydration? We overnighted the system. We trained him in about an hour. And 2 hours later, he emailed and said, you saved that child from surgery. That's a good day, and that's why we do what we do. And I think at a small company, you hear those stories a lot, right?
I think you said it well, that in large companies, you might not control the whole problem. I started my career in a large company. Zero discredit intended at all. It just wasn't for me. I was more interested in running a whole lot faster. And it's not about Machiavellian control, it's about an ability to impact. One of my favorite things in a small company is you can impact. The smallest things in a large company are large things in a small company, and you can actually move the needle. And when you can move the needle just a little bit in a large company, that impact in a small company can be the difference between patient success, non-patient success, funding or non-funding. Those are pivotal, and that's the juice, if you will. For the entrepreneur, that's the drug, is being able to do that. The ultimate drug is watching a device that you had a hand on get appropriately deployed in a clinical setting and watch the outcome. And sitting on the edge of your seat waiting, did it work? I hope there's no negative impact. And you do enough of them and then you realize, oh, I'm not an imposter. This is actually working. Yeah, you know the feeling. You get to the other side of it and you get that recognition of, oh my God, these last 4 years actually just paid off. That's the 4th patient. That's the 20th patient. For me, that is when I went back. This is a great little story. Our first in-man patients in Shockwave, one of them had his right leg treated using our device. A year and a half later, we went back for our CE study. That same patient showed up. I was nervous. We were in a redo. So I was speaking to the interventionalist saying, whoa, 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 there's no redos allowed. He said, no, he's here for the other leg.
Wow.
And I said, well, did we take a CT of his right leg? How are we doing? And he said, it's phenomenal. In fact, he wants to meet you. Have you guys ever had that?
Similar, but maybe not as good as that.
So it was an extraordinary moment. I won't go into it. We don't have a whole lot of time, but waterfalls from the other side of that conversation. And during the procedure, he's talking to me and not the doc. Very weird. Don't answer them when they do that. But it's why we do it, right? And for me, I hear about technologies like I just a moment ago heard about, and they just get the energy going. And for those who are in early stage, I think you know what I'm talking about. Those who are in large companies and there's a mission that you have, I think you know what I'm talking about. It's all about that mission. It's why at least I do what I do.
Thinking about Da Vinci, Shockwave, others you work with Daniel, how do you, educating a market about a product that's not standard of care is a major challenge. What have you learned in your career about successful ways to educate a market in that regard?
What I will tell you is my first experience at Intuitive in trying to define a market was littered with a lot of good conversations and one very, very, very disruptive and shocking one. I was in Germany with a surgeon I will not name, sitting, or I should say standing across the table next to his assistant. And during that procedure is when I had my pitch moment, because I didn't have it at the scrub sink. It was right then. And I said, we want to bring a robot in to help you with your anastomosis. And in a very, very thick accent, he yells at me and says, get the blank blank out of my OR, and flips a bloody scalpel at my gown. He was the second one to buy a robot. So how do you get over that is you've got to crystallize a need. So the only way to do that is to understand how the ultimate customer sees the problem. If you understand how they see the problem, you then need to shape the message to solve the problem as they see it. So one of the things that we ran into a lot at Shockwave is it's a voodoo technology in some respects. You can't see lithotripsy. So I had to describe it. I had to describe what, as a cardiologist, you see if it's not, if your deployment of balloon and stent is not right, and what you see when you use Shockwave. That was sort of it, but it was still voodoo. And I used an analogy. And that's what I use a lot when I'm launching technologies. The analogy I had was to put a water balloon on a table and put your left hand on it and smack it with your right hand. Do you feel that smack of the balloon in your left hand? Yes? Great. For Shockwave lithotripsy, we're just hitting it at 100 atmospheres in 2 microseconds. Oh, now I get it. You break through. You have to break through that sense of it's impossible. If you break through that and then describe it as they see the problem, then you get that crossover. If you don't have that crossover, it's never going to happen.
Maybe if I just take the lens of big and small company again, I think for those of you that work in the large companies and you take surgery, for example, or robotic surgery, you're typically fortunate to work with the leading clinicians around the world, and there are reference sites, and you're flying people to come and learn about how to do the technique, etc. For the small company, it's not so easy to have that kind of format and get the message out and responsibly train people on how to use these types of technologies. So I think that thought has to be given to that smaller companies around, do I need to partner with this technology? At what stage do I need to work with others to actually do this well? And I think getting the message out, not just a message, but clearly and one that is able to be executed where clinicians don't throw scalpels at you, is a good thing.
Yeah, and of course it's the financial, right? So you pull a financial calculator together and you make it very simple so that the simplest person can use that calculator. So one of our earliest calculators was just based on, do you know the number of beds in your hospital? And then of course each of the questions, we put answers in that we had referenced from either literature or something somebody told us. And then at the end it's like, this is the cost savings. But if you don't believe that, then go change some of these other numbers. But it really is trying to show them the financial gain as well as the clinical the improved outcomes.
One of the techniques that I use that just popped into my head to launch a new technology is if you can find a clinician or 2 or ideally 3 that are up at the luminary level that have crossed over in their belief, and then you do something a little sneaky, a little subversive. You give them a couple of slides to put in their regular slide decks. So they're at the big conference. They've got 12 slides they're supposed to get done in 8 minutes. Typical, right? Squeeze one in there that is describing your problem as you believe the community will see it. If somebody else is presenting it, now it starts to have a life. So one of the in using that technique, what I ended up doing in the very, very early days, again at Shockwave, is I had multiple presentations at TCT, the big conference associated with cardiology, where I just seeded those little nuggets. I did the same thing at the Viva conference. Every conference for 18 months, I seeded that. That started to shift the questions around what is considered success with calcium. And then I went back the following 18 months with the answer. And that ended up working really well.
Mike already knew that, so they didn't allow him to have any slides here, so you're not being tricked. This is all coached.
That's
Yeah,
right.
really, there's a slides coming out right now, right? That's a great idea, right?
It works really, really well.
But what he said there, and I'm not sure if you guys caught it, right? It's persistence. This is not going to be fast. He went 18 months And then he went 18 months again. So small companies, you need to make sure you have the capital to get those 36 months, because there's going to be another 36 months before that and probably another after. So it's all about persistence, but make sure you got your capital laid out so you know you're going to make the end game.
All right. So a few minutes left. I'd like to get the take from all three of you on what haven't I asked? What haven't we covered that is, I think, interesting and valuable to the audience here?
Maybe just a reminder. I think, first of all, everybody's got it right here because you're at this conference, but AdvaMed is a very, very powerful forum. If you don't use this forum to connect with each other, then it's a big missed opportunity. And I think that in the innovation space, and call it the capital space as well, big company working with small company is a really good thing, and it should happen in both directions. And I think this is a great place for all of that to happen. So I just a little reminder that I think that investing in this kind of forum is very important.
Yeah, that's great advice. I think Ray had asked me this, like, Ray, are you listening? I'm talking to you. Okay. So I had said to Ray the other day, I'm like, the reason I go to AdvaMed, or started going to AdvaMed, is the very first conference I went to in 2011, I walked out and went, holy crap, I'm in charge as a CEO of 11 different types of law. There's not one lawyer that's going to say that they're going to give you, if it's an HR lawyer, they're never going to give you IP. And if it's a corporate lawyer, they're never going to give you IRS advice. But as a CEO, you are in charge of 11 different types of law. So by coming to this conference, you can go and hear the latest in a lot of those different areas. So definitely take advantage of it.
This was brought up a little bit earlier, but to me, there are a few mistakes you can make. I'm now on my 9th company. I founded 3 of them. The number one mistake that I have made at one level or another in every one I've been involved in is compromising on a key hire. I just cannot emphasize enough. Be belligerent on making sure you bring in the right people. So I don't have an engineering background. I ran engineering at Shockwave for 2.5 years because I didn't find the right VP of R&D. And my board was yelling at me. Okay, so one of those people is Fred Mull, the founder of Intuitive Surgical. When Fred yells, you kind of listen. I've known him for a long time. I respected him. I told him stand down because I haven't found the right person yet. And when I did, and I showed that person to the board, they said, okay, now I know why you were waiting. Trust your gut on that stuff. It matters way more than you can possibly realize.
And if you make a bad hire,
get rid of them
fast.
We'll end it on that note. Now, look, thank you all for your insights and sharing your experience. And appreciate the time here today. And enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank
you.
Thank you.